Alright, so now that all the rods are in place and we have bearings that slide nice on all the rods, we're ready to now put together the X gantry. So the first parts that we gather together are the XZ Gantry Rails. And these have several features that you need to pay attention to. Again, notice that the motor mounts are slightly offset. Those need to be towards the inside. Also on the inside are holes for the limit switch trigger or the skip sense brackets. Those also have to be on the inside. The back sides have the bearing mounts and the rod holders. Those holes have to be facing to the outside. So the orientation is with these to the back, with those holes lined at the back facing into each other like so. So the first thing we'll do is put on the bearing mount. That is most easily done by hand to start. And the bolts, the M3 bolts, come through from the front and thread that in. You do not want these tight yet. You want these to be loose because we will tighten them up once we balance and level everything to make sure that the X gantry is level and parallel to everything. So it's still a little bit loose, but not super floppy. And you'll put all four of those on same way. Alright, we now have the bearing holders mounted on both of the XZ rails to go on. The next step is to take your Z rods and get your Z nut holders and put those on the rods. Now there's two sides to the Z nut brackets or the Z nut holders. The side that has the indentation is going to go down. That's going to fit over the top of the Z nut. So the Z nut will fit right up into that feature underneath. And this bump has to be pointing towards the inside. So when we put those on the rails, these rails were cleaned previously with the silicone wipe. And then we'll just use a mallet to start that. So put one on one side. And before you go any further, you do need to put the bearings on. The one that I have is going to be on the left, which means the two bearings need to go on the back. And one bearing needs to go on the front rail, since it's going to be oriented like this. You can then put the bracket on the other side. Make sure that the features line up on the same side. So you don't have one of them upside down. You can use the small end of the mallet to actually tap it down in between. And you want to come in just about an inch, maybe an inch and a half. You can over push them in, which is just fine. We're going to tap them back out to line everything up. Okay, we now have the basic X gantry rails together. We're now going to attach them to the XZ rails and start to mount them in there. What you need is the bearing holders, which will mount on the ends. You can see we pounded those in a little bit far. Make sure that those holes where the bearing mount are to the back. So we'll pop this in so that is all the way on. Pop this one in as well. And then you can tap this back into place a little bit. Put that in the light. That bracket needs to be exactly flush with this in order for the Z rods and the threaded Z rod to actually line up and not bind. Then we'll do the same thing on the other side. Again, make sure that the motor mount holes are to the back. Pop that in place. And then tap this. So now that that is oriented, we can now slip that over the gantry. And before we move that all the way down, we're going to pop the bearings in place while they're still in the rods. And that should slide all the way down without any binding. Now you will have to tap in the ends and readjust these to make sure that both sides are balanced. Now before we tighten anything up, the next operation will be to put on the top rails.